Oh, hi there. You made it. Welcome back to another reading of The Wind in the Willows. Today, we're going to read chapter 8 and 9. I haven't read these chapters before, so they'll be brand new to me, and I also will do my best at improving the voices as I go. So please make yourself cozy or start some chores or maybe take those first steps of a walk with me in the background and let's get to it. All right. Chapter 8 Toad's Adventures. When Toad found himself immured in a dank and noisome dungeon, and knew that all the grim darkness of a medieval fortress lay between him and the outer world of sunshine and well-metalled high roads where he had been lately so happy, disporting himself as if he had bought up every road in England, he flung himself at full length on the floor and shed bitter tears, and abandoned himself to dark despair. "This is the end of everything," he said. "At least it is the end of the career of Toad, which is the same thing. The popular and handsome Toad, the rich and hospitable Toad, the Toad so free and careless and debonair. How can I hope to ever be set at large again?" he said, "who have been imprisoned so justly for stealing so handsome a motor car in such an audacious manner, and for such lurid and imaginative cheek, bestowed upon such a number of fat, red-faced policemen." Here sobs choked him. "Oh, oh, 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 stupid animal that I was," he said. "Now I must languish in this dungeon till people who were proud to say that they knew me have forgotten the very name of Toad. O wise old badger," he said, "O clever, intelligent, wrought, and sensible mole, what sound judgments, what a knowledge of men and matters you possess! O unhappy and forsaken Toad!" With lamentations such as these, he passed his days and nights for several weeks, refusing his meals or intermediate light refreshments. Though the grim and ancient gaoler, knowing that Toad's pockets were well lined, frequently pointed out that many comforts, and indeed luxuries, could be arranged at a price from outside. Now the gaoler had a daughter, a pleasant wench and good-hearted, who assisted her father in the lighter duties of his post. She was particularly fond of animals, and besides her canary, whose cage hung on a nail in the massive wall of the keep by day, to the great annoyance of prisoners who relished an after-dinner nap, and was shrouded in anti-macassar on the parlor table at night, she kept several piebald mice and a restless revolving squirrel. This kind-hearted girl, pitying the misery of Toad, said to her father one day, "Father, I can't bear to see the poor beast so unhappy and getting so thin. You let me have the managing of him. You know how fond of animals I am. I'll make him eat from my hand and sit up and do all sorts of things." Her father replied that she could do what she liked with him. He was tired of Toad and his sulks and his airs and his meanness. So that day she went on her errand of mercy and knocked at the door of Toad's cell. "Now cheer up, Toad," she said coaxingly on entering, "and sit up and dry your eyes and be a sensible animal. And do try and eat a bit of dinner. See, I've brought you some of mine, hot from the oven." It was bubble and squeak between two plates, and its fragrance filled the narrow cell. The penetrating smell of cabbage reached the nose of Toad as he lay prostrate in his misery on the floor, and gave him the idea for a moment that perhaps life was not such a blank and desperate thing as he had imagined. But still he wailed and kicked with his legs and refused to be comforted. So the wise girl retired for the time, but of course a good deal of the smell of hot cabbage remained behind, as it will do, and Toad, between his sobs, sniffed and reflected, and gradually began to think new and inspiring thoughts of rivalry and poetry and deeds still to be done, of broad meadows and cattle browsing in them, raked by sun and wind, of kitchen gardens and straight herb borders and warm snapdragon beset by bees, and of the comforting clink of dishes set down on the table at Toad Hall, and the scrape of chair legs on the floor as everyone pulled himself close up to his work. The air of the narrow cell took a rosy tinge. He began to think of his friends and how they would surely be able to do something, of lawyers, and how they would have enjoyed his case, and what an ass he had been not to get in a few. And lastly, he thought of his own great cleverness and resource, and all that he was capable of if he only gave his great mind to it, and the cure was almost complete. When the girl returned some hours later, she carried a tray with a cup of fragrant tea steaming on it, and a plate piled up with very hot buttered toast, cut thick, very brown on both sides, with the butter running through the holes in it in great golden drops, like honey from the honeycomb. The smell of that buttered toast simply talked to Toad, and with no uncertain voice, talked of warm kitchens, of breakfasts on bright, frosty mornings, of cozy parlor firesides on winter evenings, when one's ramble was over and slippered feet were propped up on the fender, of the burring of contented cats and the twitter of sleepy canaries. Toad sat up on end once more, dried his eyes, sipped his tea, and munched his toast, and soon began talking freely about himself and the house he lived in, and his doing theirs, and how important he was, and what a lot of his friends thought of him. The Gowler's daughter saw that the topic was doing him as much good as the tea, as indeed it was, and encouraged him to go on. "Tell me about Toad Hall," she said. "It sounds beautiful."
"Toad Hall," said Toad proudly, "is an eligible, self-contained gentleman's residence, with very unique, dating in part from the 14th century, but replete with every modern convenience. Update to sanitation, 5 minutes from church, post office, and golf links. Suitable for—"
"Bless this animal," said the girl, laughing. "I don't want to take it. Tell me something real about it. But first, till I fetch you some more tea and toast." She tripped away and presently returned with a fresh trayful, and Toad, pitching into the toast with avidity, his spirits quite restored to their usual level, told her about the boathouse, and the fish pond, and the old walled kitchen garden, and about the pigsties, and the stables, and the pigeon house, and the hen house, and about the dairy, and the wash house, and the china cupboards, and the linen presses. She liked that bit especially. And about the banqueting hall, and the fun that they had there when the other animals are gathered around the table, and Toad was at his best, singing songs, telling stories, just carrying on generally. Then she wanted to know about his animal friends, and was very interested in all he had to tell her about them and how they lived and what they did to pass their time. Of course, she did not say she was fond of animals as pets, because she had the sense to see that Toad would be extremely offended. When she said good night, having filled his water jug and shaken up his straw for him, Toad was very much the same sanguine, self-satisfied animal that he had been of old. He sang a little song or two of the sort he used to sing at his dinner parties, curled himself up in the straw, and had an excellent night's rest in the pleasantness of dreams. They had many interesting talks together after that, as the dreary days went on, and the Gowler's daughter grew very sorry for Toad, and thought it a great shame that a poor little animal should be locked up in prison for what seemed to be a very trivial offense. Toad, of course, in his vanity, thought that her interest in him proceeded from a growing tenderness, and he could not help half regretting that the social gulf between them was so very wide, for she was a comely lass, and evidently admired her very much. One morning the girl was very thoughtful, and answered at random, and did not seem to Toad to be paying proper attention to his witty sayings and sparkling comments. "Toad," she said presently, Just listen, please. I have an aunt who is a washerwoman.
There, said Toad, graciously ineffable. Never mind, think no more of it. I have several aunts who ought to be washerwomen.
Do be quiet a minute, Toad, said the girl. You talk too much. That's your chief fault. And I'm trying to think, and you hurt my head. As I said, I have an aunt who is a washerwoman. She does the washing for all the prisoners in this castle. We try to keep any paying business of that sort in the family, you understand. She takes out the washing on Monday morning and brings it on Friday evening. This is a Thursday. Now this is what occurs to me. You're very rich. At least you're always telling me so. And she's very poor. A few pounds wouldn't make any difference to you, and it would mean a lot to her. Now, I think if she were properly approached, squared, I believe is the word you animals use, you could come to some sort of arrangement by which she would let you have her dress and bonnet and so on, and you could escape from the castle as the official washerwoman. You're very alike in many respects, particularly about the figure.
We're not, said the Toad in a huff. I have a very elegant figure for what I am.
So has my aunt, replied the girl, for what she is. But have it your way, you horrid, proud, ungrateful animal, when I'm sorry for you and trying to help you.
Yes, that's all right. Thank you very much indeed, said the Toad hurriedly. But look here, you wouldn't surely have Mr. Toad of Toad Hall going about the country disguised as a washerwoman?
Then you can stop here as a toad, replied the girl with much spirit.
I suppose you ought to go off in a couch and four. Honest Toad was always ready to admit himself in the wrong. You are a good and kind, clever girl, he said, and I am indeed a proud and stupid Toad. Introduce me to your worthy aunt, if you will be so kind, and I have no doubt that the excellent lady and I will be able to arrange terms satisfactory to both parties.
Next evening the girl ushered her aunt into Toad's cell, bearing his week's washing pinned up in a towel. The old lady had been prepared beforehand for the interview, and the sight of certain gold sovereigns that Toad had thoughtfully placed on the table in full view practically completed the matter and left little further to discuss. In return for his cash, Toad received a cotton print gown, an apron, a shawl, and a rusty black bonnet. The only stipulation the old lady made being that she should be gagged and bound and dumped down in a corner. By this not very convincing artifice, she explained, aided by picturesque fiction which she could supply herself, she hoped to retain her situation in spite of the suspicious appearance of things. Toad was delighted with the suggestion. It would enable him to leave the prison in some style, and with his reputation for being a desperate and dangerous fellow untarnished. And he readily helped the gaoler's daughter to make her aunt appear as much as possible the victim of circumstance, over which she had no control. Now it's your turn, Toad, said the girl. Take off that coat and waistcoat of yours. You're fat enough as it is.
Shaking with laughter, she proceeded to hook and eye him into the cotton print gown, arranged the shawl with a professional fold, and tied the strings of the rusty bonnet under his chin.
You're the very image of her, she giggled. Only I'm sure you never looked half so respectable in all your life before. Now goodbye, Toad, and good luck. Go straight down the way you came up, and if anyone says anything to you, as they probably will, being but men, you can shove it back a bit, of course. But remember, you're a widow woman, quite alone in the world, with a character to lose.
With a quaking heart, but as firm as footstep as he could command, Toad set forth cautiously on what seemed to be a most harebrained and hazardous undertaking. But he was soon agreeably surprised to find how easy everything was made for him, and a little humbled at the thought that both his popularity and the sex that seemed to inspire it were really others. The washerwoman's squat figure in its familiar cotton print seemed a passport for every barred door and grim gateway. Even when he hesitated, uncertain as to the right turn to take, he found himself helped out of his difficulty by the warder at the next gate, anxious to be off to his tea, summoning him to come along sharp and not keep him waiting there all night. The chaff and the humorous sallies to which he was subjected, and to which, of course, he had to provide prompt and effective reply, formed, indeed, his chief danger.
For Toad was an animal with a strong sense of his own dignity, and the chaff was mostly, he thought, poor and clumsy, and the humor of the sallies entirely lacking. However, he kept his temper, though with great difficulty, suited his retorts to his company and his supposed character, and did his best not to overstep the limits of good taste. It seemed hours before he crossed the last courtyard, rejected the pressing invitations from the last guardroom, and dodged the outspread arms of the last warder, pleading with simulated passion for just one farewell embrace. But at last he heard the wicket gate and the great outer door click behind him, felt the fresh air of the outer world upon his anxious brow, and he knew that he was free. Dizzy with the easy success of his daring exploit, he walked quickly towards the lights of the town, not knowing in the least what he should do next, only quite certain of one thing, that he must remove himself as quickly as possible from the neighborhood where the lady he was forced to represent was so well known and so popular a character. As he walked along, considering, his attention was caught by some red and green lights a little way off, to one side of the town, and the sound of the puffing and snorting of engines and the banging of shunted trucks fell on his ear.
Aha! He thought. This is a piece of luck. A railway station is the thing I most in the whole world at this moment want. And what's more, I needn't go through the town to get it, and shan't have to support this humiliating character by repartees which, though thoroughly effective, do not assist one's self-respect.
He made his way to the station accordingly, consulted a timetable, and found that a train bound more or less in the direction of his home was due to start in half an hour.
More luck,
said Toad, his spirits rising rapidly, and went off to the booking office to buy his ticket. He gave the name of the station that he knew to be the nearest to the village of which Toad Hall was the principal feature, and mechanically put his fingers in search of the necessary money where his waistcoat pocket should have been. But here the cotton gown, which had notably stood by him so far, and which he had basically forgotten, intervened and frustrated his efforts. In a sort of nightmare, he struggled with the strange, uncanny thing that seemed to hold his hands, turn all muscular strivings to water, and laugh at him all the time, while other travelers, forming up in a line behind him, waited with impatience, making suggestions of more or less value and comments of more or less stringency and point. At last, somehow, he never rightly understood how, he bust the barriers, attained the goal, arrived at where all waistcoat pockets are eternally situated, and found not only no money, but no pocket to hold it. No waistcoat to hold the pocket. To his horror, he recollected that he had left both coat and waistcoat behind him in his cell, and with them his pocketbook, money, keys, watch, matches, pencil case, all that makes life worth living, all that distinguished the many-pocketed animal, the lord of creation, from the inferior one-pocketed or no-pocketed productions that hop or trip about permissively, unequipped for the real contest. In his misery, he made one desperate effort to carry the thing off, and with a return to his fine old manner, a blend of the squire and the college don, he said,
"Look here, I find I've left my purse behind. Just give me that ticket, will you, and I'll send the money on tomorrow. I'm well known in these parts."
The clerk stared at him. And the rusty black bonnet a moment, and then laughed. "I think you were pretty well known in these parts," he said. "If you've tried this game on often, here, stand away from the window, please. Madame, you're obstructing the other passengers." An old gentleman who had been prodding him in the back for some moments here thrust him away, and what was worse, addressed him as if "Good woman," which angered Toad more than anything that had occurred that evening. Baffled and full of despair, he wandered blindly down the platform where the train was standing, and tears trickled down each side of his nose. It was hard, he thought, to be within sight of safety and almost of home, and to be balked by the want of a few wretched shillings, and by the pettifoggy mistrustfulness of paid officials. Very soon his escape would be discovered. The hunt would be up. He would be caught, reviled, loaded with chains, dragged back again to prison, and bread and water and straw, his guards and penalties would be doubled. And oh, what sarcastic remarks the girl would make. What was to be done? He was not swift of foot. His figure was unfortunately recognizable. Could he not squeeze under the seat of a carriage? He had seen this method adopted by schoolboys when the journey money provided by thoughtful parents had been diverted to other and better ends. As he pondered, he found himself opposite the engines, which was being oiled, wiped, and generally caressed by its affectionate driver, a burly man with an oil can in one hand and a lump of cotton waste in the other.
"Oh, hello, Mother," said the engine driver. "What's the trouble? You don't look particularly cheerful."
"Oh, sir," said the toad, crying afresh, "I am a poor, unhappy washwoman, and I've lost all my money, and I can't pay for a ticket, and I must get home tonight somehow. And whatever I am to do, I don't know. Oh, dear, oh, dear."
"That's a bad business indeed," said the engine driver reflectively. "Lost your money and you can't get home, and you got some kids too waiting for you, I dare say."
"Any amount of 'em," sobbed Toad, "and they'll be hungry and paying with matches and upsetting lamps and little innocents and quarreling and going on generally. Oh, dear, oh, dear."
"Well, I'll tell you what I'll do," said the good engine driver. "You're a washwoman to your trade, says you. Very well, that is, and I'm an engine driver, as you well may see, and that's no denying it's terrible dirty work. Uses up a power of shirts, it does, till my missus is fair tired of washing 'em up. If you'll wash a few shirts for me when you get home and send 'em along, I'll give you a ride on my engine. It's against the company's regulations, but we're not so very particular in these out-of-the-way parts."
The toad's misery turned into rapture as he eagerly scrambled up into the cab of the engine. Of course, he had never washed a shirt in his life, and couldn't if he tried, and anyway, he wasn't going to begin, but he thought,
"Well, I'll get safely home to Toad Hall, and have money again, and pockets to keep it in, and I will send the engine driver enough to pay quite a quantity of washing, and that will be the same thing or better."
The guard waved his welcome flag, the engine driver whistled in cheerful response, and the train moved out of the station. As the speed increased, and Toad could see on either side of him real fields and trees and hedges and cows and horses, all flying past him, and as he thought how every minute was bringing him nearer to Toad Hall, and sympathetic friends, and money to drink in his pocket, and a soft bed to sleep in, and good things to eat, and praise and admiration at the recital of his adventures and his surpassing cleverness, he began to skip up and down and chat and shout and sing snatches of song, to the great astonishment of the engine driver, who had come across washwomen before at long intervals, but never one at all like this. They had covered many and many a mile, and Toad was already considering what he would have for supper as soon as he got home, when he noticed that the engine driver, with a puzzled expression on his face, was leaning over the side of the engine and listening hard. Then he saw him climb on to the coals and gaze out over the top of the train. Then he returned and said to Toad,
"It's very strange. We're the last train running in the direction tonight, yet I could be sworn that I heard another following us."
Toad ceased his frivolous antics at once. He became grave and depressed, and a dull pain in his lower part of his spine, communicating itself to his legs, made him want to sit down, and try desperately not to think of all the possibilities. By this time the moon was shining brightly, and the engine driver, steadying himself on the coal, could command a view of the line behind him for a long distance. Presently he called out,
"Right, I can see it clearly now. It's an engine on the rails coming at a great pace. It looks as if we're being pursued."
The miserable Toad, crouching in the coal dust, tried hard to think of something to do, with dismal want of success.
"Someone's degrading on us fast,"
cried the engine driver,
"and the engine is crowded with the queerest lot of people. Men like ancient wardens, waving halberds, police on their helmets, waving truncheons, and shabbily dressed men in pot hats, obvious and unmistakable plain clothes, detectives even at this distance, waving revolvers and walking sticks, all waving and shouting the same thing. Stop! Stop! Stop!"
Then Toad fell on his knees among the coals, and, raising his clasped paws in supplication, cried, "Save me, only save me, dear kind Mr. Engine Driver, and I will confess everything. I am not the simple washerwoman I seem to be.
I have no children waiting for me, innocent or otherwise. I am a Toad, the well-known and popular Mr. Toad, a landed proprietor. I have just escaped by my great daring and cleverness from a loathsome dungeon into which my enemies have flung me, and if those fellows on that engine recapture me, it will be chains and bread and water and straw and misery only once more for poor, unhappy, innocent Toad. The engine driver looked down upon him very sternly and said, "Now tell me the truth. What were you put in prison for?" "It was nothing very much," said poor Toad, coloring deeply. "I only borrowed a motor car while the owners were at lunch, that they had no need of at the time. I didn't mean to steal it really, but people, especially magistrates, take such harsh views of thoughtless and high-spirited actions." The engine driver looked very grave and said, "I fear that you have been indeed a wicked Toad, and by rights I ought to give you up to a friend of justice. But you are evidently in sore trouble and distress, so I will not desert you. I don't hold with motor cars for one thing, and I don't hold with being ordered about by policemen when I'm on my own engine for another. And the sight of an animal in tears always makes me feel queer and soft-hearted. So cheer up, Toad. I'll do my best and we'll beat them." They piled up on more coals, shoveling furiously. The furnace roared, the sparks flew, the engines leapt and swung, but still their pursuers slowly gained. The engine driver, with a sigh, wiped his brow with a handful of cotton waste and said, "I'm afraid it's no good, Toad. You see, they are running light, and they have better engine. There's just one thing left for us to do, and that's our only chance. So attend very carefully to what I tell you. A short way ahead of us is a long tunnel, and on the other side of that line passes through a thick wood. Now I will put on all the speed I can while we are running through the tunnel, but the other fellows will slow down a bit naturally for fear of an accident. When we are through, I will shut off the steam and put on brakes as hard as I can. And the moment it's safe to do so, you must jump and hide in the wood before they get through the tunnel and see you. Then they will go full speed ahead again, and they will chase me if you like for as long as they like, and as far as they like. No mind, and be ready to jump when I tell you." They piled on more coals, and the train shot into the tunnel, and the engine rushed and roared and rattled till at last they shot out of the other end into fresh air and the peaceful moonlight, and saw the wood lying dark and helpful upon either side of the line. The driver shut off steam and put on brakes. The Toad got down on the step, and as the train slowed down to almost a walking pace, he heard the driver call out, "Now jump!" Toad jumped, rolled down a short embankment, picked himself up unhurt, scrambled into the wood, and hid. Peeping out, he saw his train get up speed again and disappear at a great pace. Then out of the tunnel burst the pursuing engine, roaring and whistling, her motley crew waving their various weapons and shouting, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" When they were past, the Toad had a hearty laugh for the first time since he was thrown into prison. But he soon stopped laughing when he came to consider that it was now very late and dark and cold, and he was in an unknown wood with no money and no chance of supper, and still far from friends and home, and the dead silence of everything. After the roar and rattle of the train was something of a shock. He dared not leave the shelter of the trees, so he struck into the wood with the idea of leaving the railway as far as possible behind him. After so many weeks within the walls, he found the wood strange and unfriendly and inclined, he thought, to make fun of him. Night jars, sounding their mechanical rattle, made him think that the wood was full of searching warders, closing in on him. An owl, swooping noiselessly towards him, brushed his shoulder with its wing, making him jump with the horrid certainty that it was a hand, then flitted off moth-like, laughing its low ho, which Toad thought in a very poor taste. Once he met a fox, who stopped, looked him up and down in a sarcastic sort of way, and said,
"Hello, washerwoman. Half a pair of socks and a pillowcase short this week. Mind it doesn't occur again.
and swaggered off, sniggering. Toad looked about for a stone to throw at him, but could not succeed in finding one, which vexed him more than anything. At last, cold, hungry, and tired out, he sought the shelter of a hollow tree, where with branches and dead leaves he made himself as comfortable a bed as he could, and slept soundly till the morning. And that was chapter 8. So Toad got out of prison with the help of the Gaoler's daughter, but isn't quite home yet. So I'm glad he got out. I don't know if he learned one thing at all, though. Do you think he learned anything? I don't think so, you know. Shall we begin? Chapter 9? Oh my gosh. Okay. Chapter 9 is called Wayfarers All. Let's begin. The water rat was restless, and he did not exactly know why. To all appearances, the summer's pomp was still at fullest height, and although in the tilled acres green had given way to gold, though rowans were reddening and the woods were dashed here and there with a tawny fierceness, yet light and warmth and color were still present in undiminished measure, clean of any chilly premonitions of the passing year. But the constant chorus of the orchids in the hedges had shrunk to a casual, even song from a few yet unwearied performers. The robin was beginning to assert himself once more, and there was a feeling in the air of change and departure. The cuckoo, of course, had long been silent, but many other feathered friends, for months a part of the familiar landscape and its small society, was missing too, and it seemed that the ranks thinned steadily day by day. Rat, ever observant of all winged movements, saw that it was taking daily a southing tendency. And even as he lay in bed at night, he thought he could make out, passing in the darkness overhead, the beat and quiver of impatient pinions, obedient to the peremptory call. Nature's grand hotel has its season, like the others. As the guests, one by one, pack, pay, and depart, and the seats at the table d'hote shrink pitifully as each succeeding meal. As suites of rooms are closed, carpets taken up, and waiters sent away, these boarders who are staying on en pension until the next year's full reopening cannot help being somewhat affected by all these flirtings and farewells. This eager discussion of plans, routes, and fresh quarters, this daily shrinkage in the stream of comradeship, one gets unsettled, depressed, and inclined to be querulous. Why, this craving for change? Why not stay on quietly here, like us, and be jolly? You don't know this hotel out of the season, and what fun we have among ourselves. We fellows who remain and see the whole interesting year out. All very true, no doubt, the others always reply. We quite envy you, and some other year perhaps. But just now we have engagements, and there's the bus at the door. Our time is up. So they depart with a smile and a nod, and we miss them and feel resentful. The rat was a self-sufficing sort of animal, rooted to the land, and whoever went, he stayed. Still, he could not help noticing what was in the air and feeling some of its influence in his bones. It was difficult to settle down to anything seriously, with all this flitting going on. Leaving the waterside, where rushes stood thick and tall in a stream that was becoming sluggish and low, he wandered countrywards, crossed a field or two of pasturage already looking dusty and parched, and thrust into the great sea of wheat, yellow, wavy, and murmurous, full of quiet motion and small whisperings. Here he often loved to wander, through the forest of stiff, strong stalks that carried their own golden sky away over his head. A sky that was always dancing, shimmering, softly talking, or swaying strongly to the passing wind and recovering itself with a toss and a merry laugh. Here, too, he had many small friends, a society complete in itself, leading full and busy lives, but always with a spare moment to gossip and exchange news with a visitor. Today, however, they were very civil enough. The field mice and harvest mice seemed preoccupied. Many were digging and tunneling busily. Others gathered in small groups, examined plans and drawings of small flats, stated to be desirable and compact and situated conveniently near the stores. Some were hauling out dusty trunks and dress baskets. Others were already elbow deep packing their belongings, while everywhere piles and bundles of wheat, oats, barley, beech masts, and nuts lay about ready for transport.
He's all ready.
They cried as soon as they saw him.
Come and bear a hand, Rat, and don't stand about idle.
What sort of games are you up to? Said the water rat severely. You know, it isn't time to be thinking of winter quarters yet by a long way.
Oh, yes, we know that.
Explained a field mouse rather shamefacedly.
But it's always as well to be in good time, isn't it? We really must get all the furniture and baggage and stores moved out at this before those horrid machines begin clicking around the fields. And then, you know, the best flats get picked up so quickly nowadays. And if you're late, you have to put up with anything. And they want such a lot of doing up, too, before they're fit to move into. Of course, we're early, we know that, but we're just making a start.
Oh, bother, start, said the rat. It's a splendid day. Come for a row, or a stroll along the hedges, or a picnic in the woods or something.
I think not today, thank you.
Replied the field mouse hurriedly.
Perhaps some other day, when we have more time.
The rat, with a snort of contempt, swung round to go, tripped over a hat box, and fell with undignified remarks.
If people would be more careful,
Said a field mouse rather stiffly.
and look where they go. People would forget. Mom, you better
You won't be free, as you call it, much this side of Christmas, I can see that, retorted the rat grumpily as he picked his way out of the field. He returned somewhat despondently to his river again, his faithful, steady-going old river, which never packed up, flitted, or went into winter quarters. In the ossuaries which fringed the bank, he spied a swallow sitting. Presently it was joined by another, and then by a third, and the birds, fidgeting restlessly on their bough, talked together earnestly and low. What already? Said the rat, strolling up to them. What's the hurry? I call it simply ridiculous.
Oh, we're not off yet, if that's what you mean, replied the first swallow. We're only making plans and arranging things, talking it over, you know, what route we're talking this year and what we'll stop and so on. That's half the fun.
Fun, said the rat. Now that's just what I don't understand. If you gotta leave this pleasant place and your friends who will miss you, and your snug homes that you've been settled into, why, when the hour strikes, I've no doubt you'll go bravely and face all the trouble and discomfort and change and newness, and make believe that you're not very unhappy. But to want to talk about it or even think about it till you really need.
You don't understand, actually, said the second swallow. First, we feel it stirring within us, a sweet unrest. Then back come the recollections one by one, like homing pigeons. They flutter through our dreams at night. They fly with us in our wheelings and circlings by day. We hunger to inquire of each other, to compare notes and assure ourselves that it was all really true, as one by one the scents and sounds and names of long forgotten places come gradually back and beckon to us.
Couldn't you just stop on for just this year? Suggested the water rat wistfully. We all do our best to make you feel at home. You've no idea what good times we have here while you are far away.
I tried stopping one year, said the third swallow, and I'd grown so fond of the place that when the time came I hung back and let the others go on without me. For a few weeks it was all well enough, but afterwards, all the weary length of the nights, the shivering sunless days, the air so clammy and chill and not an insect in the acre of it. No, it was not good. My courage broke down, and the one cold, stormy night I took wing, flying well inland on account of the strong easterly gales. It was snowing hard as I beat through the passes of the great mountains, and I had a stiff light to wind through. But never shall I forget the blissful feeling of the hot sun on my back as I sped down to the lakes that lay so blue and placid before me, and the taste of my first fat insect. The past looked like a bad dream. The future was a happy holiday as I moved southwards week by week, easily, lazily lingering as long as I dared, but also heeding the call. No, I had my warning. Never again did I think of disobedience. "Oh, yes, the south of the south of the south," twittered the other two dreamily. "Its songs, its tunes, its radiant air. Oh, do you remember?"
And forgetting the rat, they slid into passionate reminiscence, while he listened fascinated and his heart burned within him. In himself, too, he knew that it was vibrating at last, that chord hitherto dormant and unsuspected. The mere chatter of these southern-bound birds, their pale and second-hand reports, had yet power to awaken his wild new sensation and thrill him through and through with it. What would one moment of the real thing work in him? One passionate touch of the real southern sun, one waft of the authentic odor. With closed eyes he dared to dream a moment in full abandonment, and when he looked again the river seemed steely and chill, the green fields gray and lightless. Then his loyal heart seemed to cry out on his weaker self for his treachery. "Why do you ever come back at all, then?" he demanded of the swallow's jealousy. "What do you find to attract you in this poor, drab little country?"
"And do you think," said the first swallow, "that the other call is not first too in its due season? The call of lush meadow grass, water orchards, warm insect-bound ponds, and browsing cattle, of haymaking and all the farm-building clusters around the house at the perfect eaves." "Do you suppose," asked the second one, "that you are the only living being that craves with a hungry longing to hear the cuckoo's notes again?" "In due time," said the third, "we shall be homesick once more for quite what little is lying on the surface of an Indian stream. But today all that seems pale and dead and very far away. Just now our blood dances to other music."
They fell a twittering among themselves once more, and this time their intoxicating babble was of violet seas, tawny sands, and lizard-haunted walls. Restlessly the rat wandered off once more, climbed the slope that rose gently from the northern bank of the river, and lay looking out towards the great ring of downs that parred his vision further southward. His simple horizon hitherto, his mountains of the moon, his limit behind which lay nothing he had cared to see or to know. Today, to him gazing south, was a newborn need stirring in his heart. The clear sky over their long, low outline seemed to pulsate with promise. Today, the unseen was everything, the unknown the only real fact of life. On this side of the hills was now the real blank, on the other lay the crowded and colored panorama that his inner eye was seeing so clearly. What seas lay beyond, green, leaping, and crested? What sun-bathed coasts, along which the white villas glittered against the olive woods? What quiet harbors, thronged with gallant shipping bound for purple islands of wine and spice, islands set low in languorous waters? He rose and descended riverwards once more, then changed his mind and sought the side of the dusty lane. There, lying half buried in the thick, cool underhedge tangled that bordered it, he could muse on the metalled road, and all the wondrous world that it led to, and all the wayfarers, too, that might have trodden it, and the fortunes and adventures they had gone to seek or found unseeking, out there, beyond, beyond. Footsteps fell on his ears, and the figure of one that walked somewhat wearily came into view, and he saw that it was a rat, and a very dusty one. The wayfarer, as he reached him, saluted with a gesture of courtesy that had something foreign about it. He hesitated a moment, then with a pleasant smile turned from the track and sat down by his side in the cool herbage. He seemed tired, and the rat let him rest unquestioned, understanding something of what was in his thoughts, knowing, too, the value all animals attach at times to just mere silent companionship, when the weary muscles slacken and the mind marks time. The wayfarer was lean and keen-featured and somewhat bowed at his shoulders. His paws were thin and long, his eyes much wrinkled at the corners, and he wore small gold earrings in his neatly set, well-shaped ears. His knitted jersey was of a faded blue, his breeches, patched and stained, were based on a blue foundation, and his small belongings that he carried were tied up in a blue cotton handkerchief. When he rested a while, the stranger sighed, snuffed the air, and looked about him.
"How's Clover, the warm whiff on the breeze," he remarked. "And those are cows we hear cropping the grass behind us, and blowing softly between mouthfuls." There is a sound of distant reapers, and yonder rises a blue line of cottage smoke against the woodland. The river runs somewhere close by, but I hear the call of a moorhen, and I see by your build that you're a washer water mariner. Everything seems asleep and yet going on all the time. It's a goodly life that you lead, friend. No doubt the best in the world, if only you were strong enough to lead it.
Yes, it's the life, the only life to live, responded the water rat dreamily and without his usual wholehearted conviction.
I did say exactly that, replied the stranger cautiously, but no doubt it's the best, and I've tried it, I know. And because I've just tried it, 6 months of it, and now it's the best, here I am, footsore and hungry, tramping away from it, tramping southward, following the old call back to the old life, the life which is mine and which will not let me go.
Is this, then, yet another of 'em? Mused the rat. And where have you come from? He asked. He hardly dared to ask where he was bound for. He seemed to know the answer only too well.
Nice little farm, replied the wayfarer briefly. Up along in that direction.
He nodded northwards.
Never mind about that. I had everything I could want, everything. I had any right in life to expect and more. And here I am, glad to be here all the same, though. Glad to be here. So many miles further on the road, so many hours nearer to my heart's desire.
His shining eyes held fast to the horizon, and he seemed to be listening for some sound that was wanting from that inland acreage vocal, as it was with the cheerful music of pasturage and farmland. You are not one of us, said the water rat. Not yet a farmer, nor even, I should judge, of this country.
Rat, replied the stranger. I'm a seafaring rat, I am, and the post I originally hailed from is Constantinople, though I'm sort of a foreigner there, too, in a manner of speaking. You will have heard of Constantinople, friend, a fair city and an ancient glorious one, and you may have heard, too, of Sigurd, king of Norway, and how he sailed thither with 60 ships, and how he and his men rode up through streets all canopied in their honor with purple and gold, and how the emperor and empress came down and banqueted with him on board his ship. When Sigurd returned home, many of his Northmen remained behind and entered the emperor's bodyguard, and my ancestor, Norwegian-born, stayed behind too, with the ships that Sigurd gave the emperor. Seafarers we have ever been, and no wonder. As for me, the city of my birth is no more my home than any pleasant port between there and the London River. I know them all, and they know me. Set me down on any of their quays or foreshores, and I am home again.
I suppose you go on great voyages, said the water rat with growing interest. Months and months out of sight of land, and provisions running short, and allowances as to water, and your mind communing with the mighty ocean, all that sort of thing?
By no means, said the sea rat frankly. Such life as you describe would not suit me at all. I'm in the coast and trade, rarely out of sight of land. It's the jolly times on shore that appeal to me as much as any seafaring. Oh, those southern seaports, the smell of 'em, the riding lights at night, the glamour.
Well, perhaps you have chosen the better way, said the rat, but rather doubtfully. Tell me something of your coasting, then, if you have a mind to, and what sort of harvest an animal of spirit might hope to bring home from it to warm his later days with gallant memories by the fireside. For my life, I confess to you, feels to me today somewhat narrow and circumscribed.
My last voyage, began the sea rat, that landed me eventually in this country, bound with high hopes for my inland farm, will serve as a good example of any of 'em, and, indeed, as an epitome of my highly-colored life. Family troubles, as usual, began in. The domestic storm cone was hoisted, and I shipped myself on board a small traveling vessel bound from Constantinople by classic seas, whose every wave thrives with a deathless memory, to the Grecian islands on the Levant. Those were golden days and balmy nights, in and out of harbor all the time. Old friends everywhere. sleeping in some cold temple or ruined cistern during the heat of the day, feasting in song and sundown under great stars in a velvet sky. Thence we turned and coasted up the Adriatic, its shores swimming in an atmosphere of amber rose and aquamarine. Oh, we lay in wide, landlocked harbors. We roamed through ancient and noble cities, until at last one morning, as the sun rose royally behind us, we rode into Venice down a path of gold. Oh, Venice is a fine city wherein a rat can wander at his ease and take his pleasure, or when weary or wandering can sit at the edge of the Grand Canal at night, feasting with his friends, when the air is full of music and the sky falls, and the lights flash and shimmer on the polished steel prows of the swaying gondolas, packed so that you could walk across the canal on them from side to side. And then the food. Do you like shellfish? Well, we won't linger over that now.
He was silent for a time, and the water rat, silent too, and enthralled, floated on dream canals and heard a phantom song pealing high between vaporous gray wave-lapped walls.
Southwards we sailed again at last, continued the sea rat, coasting down the Italian shore, till finally we made Palermo, and there I quitted for a long happy spell on shore. I never stick too long to one ship. One gets narrow-minded and prejudiced. Besides, Sicily is one of my happy hunting grounds. I know everybody there, and their ways just suit me. I spent many jolly weeks in the island, staying with friends up country. When I grew restless again, I took advantage of a ship that was trading to Sardinia and Corsica, and very glad I was to feel the fresh breeze and the sea spray in my face once more.
But isn't it very hot and stuffy down in the hold, I think you call it? Asked the water rat. The seafarer looked at him with the suspicion of a wink.
I'm an old hand, he remarked with much simplicity. The captain's cabin's good enough for me.
It's a hard life by all accounts, murmured the rat, sunk in deep thought.
For the crew it is,
replied the seafarer gravely, again with the ghost of a wink.
From Corsica, he went on, I made use of a ship that was taking wine to the mainland. We made Alacio in the evening, lay to, hauled up our wine casks, and hove them overboard, tied one to the other by long line. Then the crew took to the boats and rowed shorewards, singing as they went and drawing after them the long bobbing procession of casks, like a mile of porpoises on the sand. They had horses waiting, which dragged the casks up to the steep street of the little town with a fine rush and clatter and scramble. When the last cask was in, we went and freshened and rested and sat late into the night, drinking with our friends. And next morning I took to the great olive woods for a spell and a rest. For now I had done with islands for the time, and ports and shipping were plentiful. So I led a lazy life among the peasants, lying and watching them work, or stretched high on the hillside with the blue Mediterranean far below me. And so at length by easy stages, and partly on foot, partly by sea, to Marcellus and the meeting of old shipmates and the visiting of great ocean-bound vessels, and feasting once more. Talk of shellfish, why, sometimes I dream of shellfish of Marcellus and just wake up crying.
That reminds me, said the polite water rat, you happened to mention that you were hungry, and I ought to have spoken earlier. Of course you will stop and take midday meal with me. My hole's close by. It is some time past noon, and you're very welcome to whatever there is.
"No, I call that kind and brotherly of you," said the sea rat. "I was indeed hungry when I sat down, and ever since I inadvertently happened to mention shellfish, my pangs have been extreme. But couldn't you fetch it along out here? I am none too fond of going under hatches unless I'm obliged to, and then obligated to or something. And then while we eat, I could tell you more concerning voyages and the pleasantness of life I lead. At least it is very pleasant to me. And by your attention, I judge it condemns itself to you. Whereas if we go indoors, it is 100 to 1 that I shall presently fall asleep."
That is indeed an excellent suggestion, said the water rat and hurried off home. Then he got out the luncheon basket and packed a simple meal in which, remembering the stranger's origins and preferences, he took care to include a yard of long French bread, a sausage out of which the garlic sang, some cheese which lay down and cried, and a long-necked straw-covered flask wherein lay bottled sunshine shed and garnered on far southern slopes. Thus laden, he returned with all speed, and blushed for pleasure at the long seaman's commendations of his taste and judgment, as together they unpacked the basket and laid out the contents on the grass by the roadside. The sea rat, as soon as his hunger was somewhat assuaged, continued the history of his latest voyage, conducting his simple hearer from port to port of Spain, landing him at Lisbon, Oporto, and Bordeaux, introducing him to the pleasant harbors of Cornwall and Devon, and so up to the Channel to find that final quayside, where landing after winds long contrary, storm-driven and weather-beaten, he had caught the first magical hints and heraldings of another spring, and fired by these, had sped on a long tramp inland, hungry for the experiment of life on some quiet farmstead, very far from the wary beating of any sea. Spellbound and quivering with excitement, the water rat followed the adventurer league by league, over storm bays, through crowded roadsteads, across harbor bars on a racing tide, up winding rivers that hid their busy little towns round a sudden turn, and left him a regretful sigh planted at his dull inland farm, about which he desired to hear nothing. By this time their meals were over, and the seafarer, refreshed and strengthened, his voice more vibrant, his eye lit with a brightness that seemed caught from some faraway sea beacon, filled his glass with the red and glowing vintage of the south, and leaning towards the water rat, compelled his gaze, and held him body and soul while he talked. Those eyes were of the changing, foam-streaked gray-green of leaping northern seas, and the glass shone a hot ruby that seemed the very heart of the South, beating for him who had courage to respond to its pulsation. The twin lights, the shifting gray, and the steadfast red, mastered the water rat and held him bound, fascinated, powerless. The quiet world outside their rays receded far away and ceased to be, and the wonderful talk, flowed on. Or was it speech entirely, or did it pass as times into song? Chanty of the sailors weighing the dripping anchor, sonorous hum of the shrouds in a tearing northern east, ballad of the fisherman hauling his nets at sundown against an apricot sky, chords of guitar and mandolin from gondola, or another instrument? Did it change into the cry of the wind, plaintive at first, angrily shrill as it freshened, rising to the tearing whistle, sinking to a musical trickle of air from the leach of the bellying sail? All these sounds the spell-bound listener seemed to hear, and with them the hungry complaint of the gulls and the sea-mews, the soft thunder of the breaking wave, the cry of the protesting shingle. Back into speech again it passed, and with beating heart he was following the adventures of a dozen seaports, the fights, the escapes, the rallies, the camaraderships, the gallant undertakings. Or he searched islands for treasure, fished in still lagoons, and dozed day long on warm white stands. Of deep sea fishings he heard tell, and mighty silver gatherings of the mile-long net, of sudden perils, noise of breakers on a moonless night, or the tall bows of the great liner taking shape overhead through the fog of the merry homecoming. The headland rounded, the harbor lights opened out, the group seen dimly on the quay, the cheery hail, the splash of the hawser, the trudge of the steep little street towards the comforting glow of red curtained windows. Lastly, in his waking dream, it seemed to him the adventurer had risen to his feet, but was still speaking, still holding him fast with his sea-gray eyes.
"And now," he was softly saying, "I take to the road again, holding on southwards for many a long and dusty day, till I at last reach the little grey sea town I know so well, that clings along one steep of the harbour. There, through dark doorways, you will look down flights of stone steps, overhung by great pink tufts of valerian, and ending in a patch of sparkling blue water. The little boats that lie tethered to the strings and stanchions of the old seawall are gaily painted as those I clambered in and out of in my own childhood. The salmon leap on the floor tide. Schools of mackerels flash and play past quay sides and foreshores, and by the windows the great vessels glide, night and day, up to the moorings or forth to the open sea. There, sooner or later, the ships of all seafaring nations arrive, and there at a distant hour the ship of my choice will go to its anchor. I shall take my time, I shall tarry and bide, till at last the right one lies waiting for me, rapped out into midstream, loaded low, her bowsprit pointing down the harbor. I shall slip on board by boat or a long hawser, and then one morning I shall wake to the song and tramp of the sailors, the clink of the capstan, and the rattle of the anchor chain coming merrily in. We shall break out the jib and the foresail. The white houses on the harbor side will glide slowly past us as she gathers steering way, and the voyage will have begun. As she forges towards the headland, she will clothe herself with canvas, and then once outside, the sounding slap of great green seas as she heels to the wind, pointing south. And you will come too, young brother, for the days pass and never return, and the South still waits for you. Take the adventure, heed the call, now ere the irrevocable moment passes. 'Tis but a banging of the door behind you, a blitheful step forward, and you are out of the old life and into the new. Then some day long hence, jog home here if you will, when the cup has been drained and the play has been played, and sit down by your quiet river with a store of goodly memories for company. You can easily overtake me on the road, for you are young and I am aging, and go softly. I will linger and look back, and at last I will surely see you coming, eager and light-hearted, with all the South in your face.
The voice died away and ceased as an insect's tiny trumpet dwindles swiftly into silence. And the water rat, paralyzed and staring, saw at last but a distant speck on the white surface of the road. Mechanically he rose and proceeded to repack the luncheon basket, carefully and without haste. Mechanically he returned home, gathered together a few small necessaries and special treasures he was fond of, and put them in a satchel. Acting with slow deliberation, moving about the room like a sleepwalker, listening ever with parted lips, he swung the satchel over his shoulder, carefully selected a stout stick for his wayfaring, and with no haste, but with no hesitation at all, he stepped across the threshold, just as Mole appeared at the door.
Where are you at, Roddy?
Asked the Mole in great surprise, grasping him by the arm. I'm going south with the rest of 'em, murmured the rat in a dreamy monotone, never looking at him. Seawards first, and then on shipboard, and then to the shores that are calling me. Oh. He pressed resolutely forward, still without haste, but with dogged fixity of purpose. But the mole, now thoroughly alarmed, placed himself in front of him, and looking into his eyes, saw that they were glazed and set, and turned a streaked and shifting gray, not his friend's eyes, but the eyes of some other animal. Grappling with him strongly, he dragged him inside, threw him down, and held him. The rat struggled desperately for a few moments, and then his strength seemed suddenly to leave him, and he lay still and exhausted with closed eyes, trembling. Presently, the mole assisted him to rise and placed him in a chair, where he sat collapsed and shrunken into himself, his body shaken by a violent shivering, passing in time into a hysterical fit of dry sobbing. Mole made the door fast, threw the satchel into a drawer, and locked it, and sat down quietly on the table by his friend, waiting for the strange seizure to pass. Gradually, the rat sank into a troubled doze, broken by starts and confused murmurings of things strange and wild and foreign to the enlightened mole, and from that he passed into a deep slumber. Very anxious in mind, the mole left him for a time and busied himself with household matters, and it was getting dark when he returned to the parlor and found the rat where he had left him, wide awake indeed, but listless, silent, and dejected. He took one hasty glance at his eyes, found them, to his great gratification, clear and dark and brown again as before, and then sat down and tried to cheer him up and help him to relate what had happened to him. Poor Ratty did his best, by degrees, to explain things, but how could he put into cold words what had mostly been suggestion? How recall for another's benefit the haunting sea voices that had sung to him? How reproduce, at strange hand, the magic of the seafarer's 100 reminiscences, even to him now? The spell was broken and the glamour gone. He found it difficult to account for what had seemed, some hours ago, the inevitable and only thing. It is not surprising, then, that he failed to convey to the mole any clear idea of what he had been through that day. To the mole, this much was plain. The fit or attack had passed away and had left him sane again, though shaken and cast down by the reaction. But he seemed to have lost all interest for the time in the things that went to make up his daily life, as well as in all the pleasant forecastings of the altered days and doings that the changing seasons was surely bringing. Casually then, and with seeming indifference, the mole turned his talk to the harvest that was being gathered in, the towering wagons and their straining teams, the growing ricks and the large moon rising over bare acres dotted with sheaves. He talked of the reddening apples around, of the browning nuts, of jams and preserves, and the distilling of cordials, till by easy stages such as these he reached midwinter, its hearty joys and its snug home life, and then he became simply lyrical. By degrees, the rat began to sit up and to join in. His dull eye brightened, and has lost some of his listening air. Presently, the tactful mole slipped away and returned with a pencil and a few half sheets of paper, which he placed on the table at his friend's elbow.
It's quite a long time since you did any poetry, he remarked. You might have a try at it this evening instead of, brooding over things so much. I've an idea that you'll feel a lot better when you've got something jotted down, if it's only just the rhymes.
The rat pushed the paper away from him wearily, but the discreet mole took occasion to leave the room, and when he peeped in again some time later, the rat was absorbed and deaf to the world, alternately scribbling and sucking the top of his pencil. It is true that he sucked a good deal more than he scribbled, but it was joy to the mole to know that the cure had at least begun. That was chapter 9. Aww. That was chapter 9. 8, 9. We have 10 and 11 next week, and then the week after that will be chapter 12. So we have 2 more weeks, and we'll be done with the book. I really like this book. I love the adventures they go on. I love the friendships they have. I love the long lists of, nature metaphors, or there's just long lists of things that really captures your attention and just keeps adding and adding to the flavor and the atmosphere and the dreaminess of the scene. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back next week with chapters 10 and 11. And then the week after that, 12. I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please, it helps so much if you like the video and subscribe if you haven't, so I know that y'all like it. And as always, if you've made it this far, please leave me a teddy bear emote in the comments to let me know. And again, I am currently taking suggestions for future. I'm always taking suggestions for future books to read to you if you would like the series to continue. It just has to be in the public domain. I was thinking maybe Frankenstein. I think Frankenstein's in the public domain. I don't know how cozy that is, but I can make horror comfy and cozy. Is it horror? Is it thriller? I don't know. But if you have a book that you would love for me to read and it's put in the public domain, please let me know. Otherwise, keep being amazing to yourselves. If you're not, you deserve it. Yes, you're overthinking. Eat your snacks, drink your water, and you're doing better than you think you are, okay? Keep going. The world needs you. All right. Till next time. Goodbye.